If only they knew why the village dog followed her everywhere, they wouldn't have called her a witch.
Before I tell you this story, sit down and put everything else away. Because what happened to Amina is not something you forget by morning. It was before sunrise when the screaming began. Women ran from their huts with wrappers half tied. Men grabbed torches. Children pressed against their mothers, mouths wide open. Outside Amina's mud hut at the edge of the village sat a clay bowl filled with dark, thick beer blood. Standing over it, not moving, not blinking, was the village dog. That strange, scarred, yellow dog that had followed Amina for years. It stood with legs wide apart, teeth showing, growling at anyone who dared step close. Then Amina walked out, bare feet, wrapper twisted from sleep, ash on her cheek and fear behind her eyes. She looked at the crowd, at the bowl, and at the dog. "Witch!" Someone screamed from the back. Stones began to fly. Amina raised one hand to cover her face. Her lips split open. Her knees shook, and through cracked lips, she whispered slowly to the pressing crowd, "You don't know what that dog saved me from." The stones kept coming, but the dog still did not move. What would you have done if you were her? To understand the end, you must first understand the beginning. Amina did not grow up in comfort. She grew up in the smell of what comfort was not. Wet mud walls, smoke from a fire that never caught. Old soup stretched too many days. Her mother, thin with tired hands, coughed more than she spoke. Their room collected rain through 3 holes in the roof. Amina slept with a pot beside her bed to catch the dripping. At school, children noticed her torn sandals before they noticed her face. She heard every word. She was not deaf. She was trained to be quiet about pain. But Amina was sharp. She read every book she could find. She watched everything and forgot nothing. On the way home from the well one afternoon, she passed girls in clean clothes and bright earrings, laughing at something on a phone. They looked like people from a different world. Amina watched until they turned the corner. Then she said quietly, to no one, "One day, I will not live like this." She meant it with everything inside her. That is the most dangerous kind of hunger, born from watching a door that was never built for you. Is the price ever worth it? Shadi had been Amina's friend since they were small enough to share one sandal. She knew Amina's heart before Amina understood it herself. That is exactly why she was afraid. "Don't do it," Sade said at the old well one evening. The sky was orange and low. "Don't chase quick money. I have seen this before." "Seen what?" Amina said. "Girls who go looking for fast riches. They come back rich, yes, but they come back wrong. Eyes that don't smile even when the mouth does." "You are talking about fear," Amina said. "I am talking about escape." "They are the same road," Saad said. Amina did not answer, because right then a long black car rolled slowly past the well, the kind with no business on a dusty village road. The engine barely whispered. The back window rolled down. A woman sat inside, beautiful, expensive, gold at her neck and both wrists. She looked at Amina the way someone looks at something they have already decided to take. Her smile was slow and deliberate. "You have the face of someone meant for more," she said. The window closed. The car moved on. Amina stood very still, watching it disappear. Would you have trusted that woman? Her name was Madame V, and everything about her was designed to make you forget your good sense. She smelled of something that cost more than Amina's mother earned in a year. Her shoes had red soles. Her handbag rested in her lap like a calm, expensive secret. Her voice was smooth, not soft, smooth, like a river. with no stones. She needed a sharp girl to help at a private event in town. Easy work, good pay. She said poverty was not holy, just painful, and there was no prize for suffering through it. Amina wanted to say no. She practiced saying it on the walk home. But Madam V added one thing. You remind me of myself. Before someone opened a door for me, Amina thought of her mother's cough, the holes in the roof, the torn sandals. Shadi stood at the compound gate with arms folded. Her eyes already knew the answer. Don't go, Shadi said. Amina picked up her bag. I'll be back before dark. She stepped into the car. The door closed. Behind the moving vehicle, the yellow village dog began running, quietly, steadily, without stopping. As if it had waited for exactly this moment. What would you have done? The city hit Amina like a cold wave. Everything was clean in a way that felt hostile. Marble floors that threw your face back at you. Air cold from no open window. Lights buzzing without fire. People smiling without warmth. Madam V handed Amina to a quiet woman named Caro, who led her to a back room and held out a dress. Put this on. Dark green, soft as nothing Amina had worn before. It fell to her ankles and whispered when she moved. Caro stood her before a tall mirror and taught her how to hold her shoulders, how to enter a room like it was waiting for her, how to smile without meaning it and make it look real. Amina stared at the girl in the mirror. She did not recognize her, but she liked her. Then she noticed something. The handbag she was given had a tag inside. The jewelry had serial numbers. The shoes still had stickers on the soles. She turned the bag slowly in her hands. Everything was tagged. Everything was logged. Everything she now understood was meant to be returned before sunrise. She stood holding the bag and felt something shift quietly in her chest. Did that surprise you? Madam V found Amina staring at the tag. She looked amused, like a teacher watching a student find an answer simpler than expected. Now you understand, she said. None of this is real, Amina replied. Real is a small word. Madam V sat and crossed her legs. The people here are real. The money is real. What changes is ownership. She paused. First rule, nothing is truly yours. What matters is that people believe it is. Amina turned the bag over. The leather felt like skin. Rented looks, borrowed jewelry, paid photographs, secret arrangements, Madam V continued. The whole thing is a stage. Those girls on your village road you envied? Not rich, just better at the performance. Something fell inside Amina. Underneath the fall, something else rose. Hungry, alert, curious. What is my role? She asked. Madam V stood and smoothed her dress. Her eyes were the calm of someone holding all the cards and showing you only their backs. One party, she said. One night. Your life changes. She walked away, without waiting for a response, as if the answer were already settled. And the only question left was how long Amina would take to agree. Would you still stay after hearing that? The party was held in a glass building above the city, the kind that watches the rest of the world from a great height and feels nothing. Men arrived in dark suits and bright watches. Women came already laughing. Music played from somewhere soft and hidden. Waiters moved between guests like patient shadows. Amina followed Caro's instructions. Shoulders back. Enter like the room waited. Smiled slowly. Listen more than you speak. Then things began to happen. A man with silver at his temples turned and looked at her directly. Chief Cairo. His people came over and asked who she was. She gave them the name of the girl in the mirror. By midnight, 3 phones had photographed her. By the time the party ended, strangers online were calling her beautiful, elegant, a face worth watching. For the first time, people who had never seen her torn sandals or breathed her smoky room were saying she belonged somewhere. She floated to the car. Inside the borrowed purse, her fingers found folded notes she had not placed there, clean and quiet. When she stepped out at home, the yellow dog was sitting in the dark outside her door, waiting without impatience. Is free money ever truly free? The village changed before Amina did. That is always how it works. People don't wait to understand. They only wait to see. When Amina bought rice, oil, and medicine for her mother, neighbors noticed by evening. When she bought new sandals, thick-soled, uncracked, women at the well knew by morning. Those same mouths that whispered about torn sandals now opened wide with praise. Elders who never met her eyes now nodded. Children who once pointed at old clothes pointed at new ones with wonder. Online, strangers praised her glow. They called it hustle. They called it blessings. They typed beautiful without asking once about the cost. Amina's mother held her hand one evening. God answered, my daughter. Amina smiled and said nothing. Only Shadi was quiet. She sat with Amina one afternoon and watched her arrange new things on a shelf. A long silence moved between them. Then Shadi spoke. You never say where the money comes from? I work, Amina said. Shadi looked at her the way you look at someone standing near an edge without knowing it. I know you, she said. You are smiling, but your eyes are changing. Amina folded a dress and said nothing back. Did Shadi have a point? Madam V called 3 weeks later. They met at a quiet restaurant where the menu had no prices. She ordered without looking. She waited until the waiter left. Chief Cairo's people have been asking about you. Amina held her glass carefully. Asking what? Whether you are serious. Whether you understand this world. She paused. His circle opens doors, apartments, funding, a name with real weight, but it keeps only girls who are useful, loyal, and discreet. Her eyes did not blink. Amina understood. This was not work, not opportunity. It was ownership dressed in silk, and she was being asked to sign herself over to it. She pushed back her chair. I need to think. Madam V smiled like someone unconcerned about the eventual answer. That evening, Amina returned home to a sound she had been counting without wanting to. Her mother's cough, deeper now, wet, the kind that folds the body forward and will not let go. She sat beside her in the dark until the shaking stopped. She held her mother's hand and bent her numbers every direction. They would not stretch far enough. They never had. She sat alone afterward for a long time. Would desperation change your answer? The hospital said both lungs, treatment, medicine, money, the kind that borrowed glamour could not reach. Amina sat in the corridor on a plastic chair and ran her numbers. They would not cooperate. They never had. She called Madam V at midnight. They met the next morning in a parked car on a quiet road. No restaurant, no pretending, just a closed door and an answer already decided. Amina said yes. Within a week, she was in an apartment with tile floors and a generator that came on without asking. Her mother was in a proper facility with proper medicine. The coughing slowed. Color returned. Amina stood before the long mirror, real silk, her own key, her own quiet. From outside, it looked like answered prayer. From inside, her eyes asked questions her mouth had been trained not to speak. That night, she heard it, scratching at the balcony door, soft and patient. She opened it. The village dog sat in the city dark, dust on its paws, eyes fixed on hers. She had told no one this address. She had written it nowhere. She stared at the dog. The dog looked back. Neither moved for a very long time. Did she have another choice? The rules came slowly, so you did not feel the cage being built. Answer when called. Now, not later. Ask no questions about where money came from. Be grateful loudly in the right rooms. Never embarrass the circle. Never fall in love with anything unapproved. Never tell the truth. Not to a friend. Not in prayer. Amina learned these the way you learn a hard language, by making mistakes and paying for each one. A wrong question earned cold silence for days. A missed call earned a warning. Being seen with the wrong person felt like a hand closing slowly around her throat. She was not suffering exactly. She was managed, fed well, and watched closely. She had a nice address and a borrowed life. One evening, Madame V said it without apology. Girls who try to leave become stories people whisper about. Amina nodded and folded her hands in her lap. She did not argue. She stored the words somewhere cold inside herself, beside all the other things she had been collecting quietly. Something in her grew harder daily, steadily, the way stone forms under pressure, without announcing itself to anyone. Would you stay in that world? The dog should not have been able to follow her. That was what made it impossible to dismiss. The compound had high walls and a guard who chased it away twice the first week. He threw stones the third time. Still, every morning when Amina stepped outside, the dog was there, wet in rain, dusty in harmattan, thin but absolutely steady. The other girls stopped laughing. They began stepping around it carefully, the way you avoid disturbing things you do not understand. Amina started dreaming, a chain dragging slowly across a cement floor. No face, no owner, or just the sound of something heavy being pulled through the dark. Night after night until she woke sweating, the room smelling faintly of wet fur. Then one morning, she found it. Door bolted from inside. Window latched. Balcony hook set. No gap anywhere, but on the tile floor beside her bed were 4 muddy paw prints. Fresh, damp, perfectly clear, pressed like a signature into the white tile. Amina crouched beside them and did not move. She thought about the chain in the dreams, the prints, the weight in the dog's eyes that was bigger than hunger or habit alone. What do you think the dog means? New girls began arriving. Amina watched them the way a senior student watches newcomers, with knowledge too heavy to share and too dangerous to offer. Younger, softer, more willing to believe the performance was a real life. Madame V called Amina less. She called the new girls some more. No explanation was needed for anyone paying attention. You need to upgrade, Madame V told her at a brief cold meeting. New image, stronger ties. The circle rewards those who grow with it. What she meant was, become more useful or become invisible? Amina looked at her apartment, her wardrobe, her mother's hospital reports in the drawer. She understood fully. She was not a person in this world. She was a product with an expiry approaching. She hated it with a quiet burning rage she kept entirely hidden. But going back to smoke and hunger and torn sandals, that door had closed behind her. You cannot unknow what you have seen. Then Shadi came without warning. She walked through the apartment slowly, touching nothing, studying everything. The mirror, the shoes, the careful arrangements on every shelf. She turned finally. This place looks expensive, she said. A pause. But it feels cursed. Was Shadi right again? The rooftop event was meant to be Amina's relaunch. Madame V dressed her with intention. Right dress, right earrings, right story, prepared for every question. Amina stood straight and performed the performance she had been trained to perform. For 2 hours it held. Then a woman named Tolu arrived. Tolu was older in the circle and wore her position like armor. She watched Amina from across the rooftop with flat eyes. Then she crossed the room and spoke loudly enough for nearby bloggers to catch every word. Is this Madame V's newest project? How long before the next one? I am no one's project, Amina said. That is exactly what they all say, Tolu replied sweetly. Voices rose, people turned, phones appeared. Then Madame V moved through the gathering crowd. Amina expected defense, some signal of partnership. That was what she had earned, she believed. Instead, without hesitation, in front of cameras and polished guests who would post the video before they even reached home, Madam V raised her hand and slapped Amina hard across the face. The room went cold and completely still. Madam V straightened her bracelet. "Control yourself," she said quietly. She did not look at Amina again. Did Madam V betray her? By morning, the video had reached everywhere. Blogs posted it under headlines that made Amina sound desperate and foolish. People who had praised her glow up now called her fake and dangerous. The same fingers that once typed beautiful now typed harlot and worse without pause. Deals vanished. Calls went unanswered. The apartment felt stripped, like a stage after the performance leaves. Madam V did not call. She removed Amina from the circle the way you remove a cracked plate from a shelf, quietly and without ceremony. Amina returned to the village and sat in her mother's room, staring at the ceiling while the quiet pressed down on her chest. At dusk, the yellow dog appeared. It lay across her doorway with its head between its paws, watching the road. A soldier with no order to leave. No neighbor came to check on her. No one brought food. Then night fell. Headlights swept the wall. A black SUV stopped slowly outside the gate. The window lowered 1 inch. A voice came from the dark inside. "You know too much to just walk away, Amina." The voice was calm. That was what made it frightening. Anger can be reasoned with. Patience cannot. Did they deserve what came next? The next afternoon, she stepped out for bread and saw the SUV at the road's end. She turned toward the market. Busy, open, safer. But behind the market was a narrow alley, and that was where they found her. 2 men who moved like people not used to being questioned. One tall, one quiet. They blocked both ends without rushing. The tall one spoke calmly. "Madam V wants your silence. Walk away and nothing happens. But if you talk, post, or go to anyone, people disappear here every week and nobody asks questions." He reached for her arm. The dog came from everywhere at once. It hit the man's wrist before his hand could close. Yellow fur, speed, and teeth. Hard enough that he cried out and stumbled back. His partner ran. The tall man swore and followed. Amina ran the other direction. She did not stop until 3 streets had passed and her chest heaved against a wall. The dog stood at her feet, breathing easily, as if nothing difficult had occurred. She looked down at it. Her hands were shaking. She whispered, "What are you?" The dog looked back and said nothing as it always had. "Would fear push you toward dark help?" 3 days later, an old market woman pressed a folded paper into Amina's hand without looking at her. 5 words and a pencil map. Babanla. Beyond the market road. Amina thought about the alley, the SUV, the circle still reaching. She thought about what Shadi would say. Then she folded the paper and walked. Past the iron gate, following a sound barely audible, old and patient, like a low note held too long. 3 mango trees, a low hut, a clay lamp burning at the entrance. The air changed here. Dried herbs, palm oil, underneath both. Something metallic and still, like iron left in the rain for years. Chickens moved in shadow, no voices. Babanla was sitting inside before she knocked. Old, but nothing weak about him. His eyes had already seen whatever she carried. He listened to everything. No questions, no movement, no visible surprise. When she finished, silence sat between them like a third presence. Then he looked past her, past the doorway, at the dog standing quietly behind her. A slow smile crossed his face. "Ah," he said, "it found you before you found me. Would you have walked away at that point?" Baba and La spoke carefully. Amina listened the way frightened people do, taking what gave hope and releasing what gave warning. He could offer protection and return of power. Forces used against her would be reversed. Those who humiliated and threatened her would face what they planted. She would rise again like a tree no storm could uproot. 3 conditions. Never use the power in anger after the truth was shown. Never feed the guarding spirit with blood. Once the full truth of her situation was revealed, stop. That very moment. Amina nodded at each one. She heard the words. But the mind under pressure takes only what it wants from a warning. The rest gets folded away for later, trusting later will never actually come. The ritual was done at the compound's edge under a moonless sky. Ash, candles, old words spoken too low to follow. She knelt with hands open and eyes closed. She felt nothing, no heat, no wind. Then, at the final word, the dog threw back its head and howled, one long, trembling sound that rose before cutting suddenly to silence, as if something invisible had entered the dark air and quietly settled into everything. Is the price ever worth it? She returned to the city different, not louder, not more polished. Different the way water looks the same before and after heating. You cannot tell until you put your hand inside it. Shifts came quietly. A blogger who had written cruelest about Amina found her account suspended with no explanation given. 2 of Cairo's partners were photographed somewhere they should not have been, and the pictures moved through the city with no one claiming responsibility. New money reached Amina through clean paths. A brand contacted her. Then another. An agency said she had a presence that was hard to manufacture. People who once mocked her now chose words carefully when her name came up. The village dog appeared at every door she entered. It stayed without begging, simply present as it had always been. And Amina, rising again, felt something unexpected inside her. Not relief, not gratitude, something sharper, warmer, dangerous like fire-finding dry wood. She looked at what remained of Madame V's circle, and the quiet thing in her chest said, "They have not paid enough." Far away, Madame V looked up from her phone and whispered, "Who touched this girl? Would you call that justice? Or something darker?" Shadi found her at the laptop, documents across the screen, financial records, messages, photographs gathered over weeks. Each piece a tile in a picture that, fully assembled, would bring everything down. Shadi sat across the table and watched for a while. "Who gave you those?" she asked. "People talk," Amina said without looking up. "Amina." Shadi's voice slowed deliberately. "I am the only one who knew you before all this, so hear me." She waited until Amina looked up. "You are not trying to survive anymore. You are enjoying this." A rival who laughed loudest at the slap video could no longer sleep. One of Cairo's closest allies had been quietly arrested on evidence appearing from nowhere. Madame V's empire cracked from below, silently, the way old ground cracks before opening wide. "They destroyed me first," Amina said. "They did," Shadi replied. "And every part of that was wrong." She pointed directly at Amina's face. "But look at yourself when you say it. That is not someone seeking justice. That is someone who has learned to feed on pain." Amina turned back to the screen. Shadi stood and walked out without another word, Did revenge change her too much? On the night she planned to finish everything, the dog would not let her leave. The final document was ready. The journalist saved, the message typed and waiting. One move would end Madame V completely. Career, reputation, freedom, all at once. She went to the door. The dog lay across the threshold, not sleeping, eyes open and fixed on her. When she reached for the handle, it growled, not at the door, but at her, directly and personally. She stepped forward. The growl deepened, and it rose to its feet. Babanla's voice returned. Never use the power in anger after the truth is shown. She pushed it away. This was completion, not anger. But the dog's eyes held something too heavy for an animal. Ancient, exhausted, certain. Shadi's words returned, the face of someone who feeds on pain. She stood at the threshold. 1 second, then 2. Then she stepped around the dog and walked into the dark road. "Nobody will stop me now," she said. The dog did not follow. It remained on the threshold, watching her go with those steady eyes. Silent, because it had already said everything it could. Was that her biggest mistake? By the next evening, Madame V was finished. Messages leaked first. Chains between her and Cairo's circle, names and arrangements never meant for daylight. Journalists moved quickly. By morning, the story ran on every platform. Brands disappeared. Sponsors went silent. The bloggers who had called Amina desperate now wrote threads about the woman who built everything on girls like her. The public that had applauded Madame V's life without once asking about its foundation now tore it apart with matching enthusiasm. Amina watched from a quiet room. She felt each update land. Each fall gave a warmth she chose not to examine too closely. She expected to feel free. Instead, she felt hollow. The way a room feels after all the furniture leaves. Clean, yes, but echoing where silence should not be. She set her phone down. Near midnight, her gate knocked. Madame V stood in the dark, hair loose, dress wrinkled, plain slippers. Every layer of borrowed shine surrendered. Her hands shook. Her eyes were glassy. She was laughing, but not with happiness. The laugh of someone who had seen something terrible and could not come back from the seeing of it. Did Madame V deserve that fall? Amina let her in, not from pity, from an instinct saying, "This woman knows something you need, and you need it now." Madame V sat on the floor, not the chair, and pulled her knees to her chest. Then she spoke. On the day Amina first arrived at the city gate, Madame V's car passed a narrow section of road. A speeding motorbike shot toward Amina's open window. A street dog nearby threw itself into the motorbike's path. It was struck hard. It dragged itself aside, bleeding, and watched the car go on. Madame V had seen it and thought nothing. But Babanla recognized it completely. When Amina came to him, desperate and broken, the ritual did not create a protector. It recognized one. The dog had chosen Amina before any ceremony existed, had given itself for her once already. The ritual sealed what had begun, tied the debt formally, made the protection binding. But binding always runs in both directions. Madame V raised her face. Her eyes were emptied out. "It was never hunting you," she whispered. "It was delaying what is owed." She lifted one shaking hand toward the corner. The dog sat there, still, watching them both. Did that change how you see everything? Cold arrived so suddenly that Amina's breath showed white. Not wind cold. Something older. The kind that comes when warmth leaves all at once. The dog began to whine, a sound she had never heard from it. Low, climbing, pained. It pressed its head to the floor. Then she saw blood, thin and dark, from the corner of its mouth. The shadows moved wrong, not with the candle, against it. Babanla was in the room. No footsteps, no door, simply there, standing still, looking at Amina with eyes holding no surprise, no mercy. Only the patience of someone who knew this moment was always coming. "You were told," he said. "I know," Amina said. "After the truth was shown, you were to stop." The dog stood at the door. You stepped over it. "What happens now?" she whispered. He looked at the dog, then at her. "The debt is not money, not fame. It is the peace you kept trying to buy through shortcuts. Your rest, your family's rest. Everything borrowed must return." He stepped into shadow. "Unless you close it yourself. The same crowd that called you a witch must hear the truth from your own mouth." "Would you confess, even if nobody forgave you?" She stood before them at sunrise, still and close, faces tight, women with folded arms, men with hands behind backs, children pressed to mothers, the same eyes that threw stones, the same mouths that screamed, "Witch." Amina stood barefoot, no silk, nothing borrowed. She told them everything. The house smelling of smoke and hunger, Madame V's car, the rented shine. The night she said yes, because her mother bled from coughing and no number reached the cost. The cage, the alley, Babanla, the conditions she heard but didn't keep, the revenge she fed past when she should have stopped. Every piece laid open in morning air. When she finished, she looked down. The dog lay at her feet, trembling, thinner than she had ever seen it. Its eyes opened once, quiet, full, certain, and found her face. Then closed. The village went silent. Then one person wept, then many, not because they forgave her, but because they understood at last. The girl they called a witch was first a hungry child at a well, watching a world not built to hold her. The dog never chased her. It chose her. What would you have done? And did the village judge her too fast?
Share this story with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.